Prime amongst Aboriginal tradition, Australia-wide, is the concept of song lines, the magnetic currents running through the earth. Using a long-forgotten sense, they follow these energy flows all over the country, crisscrossing in an ancient network that demarcates all the special sacred sites. We follow the energy grid to the central intersection point in the heart of South Australia's Flinders Ranges. Directed by the discovery of Melbourne grid researcher Paul Cadwallader, we found extraordinary ancient rock carvings that predate any found elsewhere on Earth by 25,000 years. Well-defined hieroglyphs record humanity's earliest writing and show clear links with other ancient cultures. We find an unusual Aboriginal tribe who lived on the grid point called the Adnyamathanha, which is a Hebrew word meaning God's gift. The Adnyamathanha, like other people living on the key grid points around the world, record stories of remarkable happenings and the comings and goings of strange beings from the heavens called the Bwanapal, who came to teach their people and rescue them in times of disaster.
The story goes is, the story started north of Lee Creek. It's a place called Mount Termination where Yulu, which is the leader of our tribe, tribal leader, elder, which mainly did the ceremonies, and he called Yulu, Yulu. And Yulu was always dressed up in flesh costumes where he'd come down and start the ceremony, and of course the Yulu had to be a Wiru person, the leader, the elder in the group. And the Yulu at this stage had to come down and do a ceremony, which is a place we call Within a Pound today. It's all flat land between the two lakes, all flat land, thousands of years ago. And of course all our people met here and waiting for the Yulu to come down. And the Yulu came as far as a place called Lee Creek. He lit a big fire. He let a smoke signal to let the people know that he was coming down. And as he come past Lee Creek, a little township called Copley, there's two rolling hills near Copley where represents the two akuras, two joint serpents, waiting, because they knew that wherever Yulu was going to a large group of people. So anyway, the Yulu came along quickly, and the two akuras come along behind. And as they came along behind, they started moving the soil with their big bellies. And what made the big Runa Valley, she coming down, see two big ridges. The two snakes, both male and female, came along together, and they was tracking the Yulu. And the Yulu got here, and the Yulu said to the people, "We gotta hurry up, do that ceremony, because the two Wapmas are coming, two okuras." And see how all the people there, they were going into the ceremony, right? See all them little dotted lines there, the people going into the ceremony, and then you got the circles. And that's where Yulu came in, and Yulu said, "Right, we'll do the ceremony," and they did the ceremony. And of course, when they finished, the two snakes came around. And one went round, and another one came back. One's looking that way, another one's looking this way. And the head of the male snake is Buckaroo Rock, where it's looking down, simple like that. And the head of the female snake is St. Mary's Peak, where it looks up into the sky. And it's the highest peak in the Flinders Ranges, St. Mary's, by looking straight up in the sky. And the head of the male. But that also is a symbol of equal rights between men and women in Adnyamathanha culture, where they do things, they share things in the sky. And so the two snakes then will themselves to die, which forms the walls of what we call Within a Pound today.
With these rock carvings that we've found out in the Flinders Ranges, how did you first come across them, and how did this whole enigmatic mystery start up for you?
I became fascinated with ancient stones and carvings all over the world. And I realised that as far as I knew, and most people knew, there appeared to be nothing in Australia. And this seemed very intriguing to me, that why would one country be left out? So I went on a quest, searching and researching, and discovered that, lo and behold, there were a number of astounding things that were not generally known, including stone circles, like in England. And this led me to the understanding that obviously the same type of megalithic construction and possible petroglyphs and other related phenomena obviously were in Australia, but were either undiscovered or were unknown. My interest in the world grid, the Becker-Hadron grid system, made me realise that grid point 44 was an obvious place to start, and certainly provided the results, spectacular results, beyond what I was expecting. My first discovery at the gorge called Chambers Gorge was an amazing array of petroglyphs carved in stone, and at a glance walking down the gorge, it was abundantly clear that many of the characters were from I could recognise from other ancient languages. So quite clearly you were looking at either another race of people living in that area, or the fact that ancient people in Australia had a world, or a part of a world language system. While there are interesting petroglyphs all over Australia, suggesting many different stories, the high concentration of them in grid point 44 in South Australia would certainly suggest that there was a special religious and ceremonial aspect to people being there and what was conducted there, and therefore the petroglyphs carved in stone. The actual meaning of the petroglyphs remains a mystery at this stage, and like the ancient inscriptions in Pakistan at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and Easter Island writing, the Rongo-Rongo writing, all of which are reasonably undeciphered, although there's elements of understanding of some of it. The interesting thing is, though, that the series of glyphs in grid point 44 have direct correlation, in my opinion, to the ancient writing of Easter Island. And many similarities can be found that are identical in these locations to the Easter Island writing.
And Easter Island writing ties in with the whole mythos of a one-time sunken continent on the Pacific tectonic plate. And again, this notion of some sort of mother tongue that Pacific Ring ancient languages could be traced back to.
This particular series of glyphs that I've got here recorded, which we'll have a look at, clearly shows this.
So what you've got here is the two examples of Australian glyphs that are remarkably similar, one of them being the Chambers Gorge glyph, which is what, this one here, and this is another one in outback New South Wales. And then you've related it to early Chinese, Pakistan, is that Indus Valley writing?
Indus Valley writing.
Indus Valley, and Easter Island Rongo-Rongo.
That's right.
And from any of those cultures, is there any meaning that you can associate with the glyph?
Well, the interesting thing is that while the Easter Island language generally seems to be undeciphered, the same with the Indus Valley writing, and certainly at this stage the Australian petroglyphs, the ancient Chinese is more recorded, and as a result this particular petroglyph here, in holding what looks like a test tube filled with something, in ancient Chinese means a person with great knowledge who has the precision of talking on a subject with the precision of an arrow. And that certainly seems to indicate some sort of arcane, secret knowledge.
So when the people moved across this land and did their malkaras, ceremonies, they looked at the walls of Wupina Pound and they were taught of the dreaming. And they looked at Lee Creek when the white man came there and dug in the ground and found this what we call brown coal, still burning underground. That's where Yula lit the fire. And then looked at them two rocks and they remembered their two stages of Malkara, you know, the first and the second stage of initiation. And of course Malkara is educational. It's educational to all tribal groups in Australia. And it's got a lot more respect. And it teaches you sacred things.
A lot of our old people have said that in very, very, very ancient times, and their stories stretch right back to a time when, like, the earth was one big landmass, and all the early ancient cultures lived together and living in harmony and peace and under the one spiritual religion or one spiritual guidance of God.
Well, it's now understood in our philosophy and physics that reality comes into being in a triadic relationship between perception, language, and the world that we live and create in. Those three are inseparable. There's an old saying in Sanskrit that everything comes into existence through that which perceives and languages it. Everything takes on their existence through perception and language. In the beginning there was the word. The language is part of the triadic thing that brings the world into existence.
And language in fact encodes the thought forms that are the dreaming that we're expressing, sort of thing.
Right, exactly. And so that the different levels of relationship and the sort of invisible world that surrounds our physical world, each step or phase of initiation in Aboriginal life gave them a language in which they could perceive and activate those relationships that were previously invisible to them. I mean, we go through that sort of vaguely with our language development, but with the in an initiatic society, it was made very clear that as the organism matures, different centers of awareness open. And for each one of those centers is provided with a different language ground. And with that neurological base, there's a language that provides that base with a capacity to experience reality in a different way.
Aboriginal law maintains that the world was thought into existence during the dreaming of the ancestor spirits, who dreamt their spirits into energising every part of reality, creating a harmonically tuned balance of natural forces that includes the biomagnetic pattern of energies around the planet, the grid.
Our people, because we're very, very spiritual, and we came as spirits, we can send our spirits into anything we choose. And even today, the clever people, we call them, they can just lie down anywhere, any time of the day, or even just walk about, and in a form of meditation they could send their spirit out anywhere, because we came first as spirits from the heavens.
Well, now we're just on our way into Red Gorge, which is just out back of Lee Creek, between Lee Creek, Copley and the Nepapuna Mission where we were earlier on. Red Gorge, we're told, has a lot more carvings and engravings than Chambers Gorge and some of the other sites we've looked at. So we're just going to go down into the gorge now and see what we can find.
When Charles Percy Montfort visited Red Gorge in 1937, he intentionally did not tell his Aboriginal companions the object of the visit. As the party walked along the floor of the gorge, the Aborigines passed group after group of clearly defined engravings without apparently having seen them. Even when their attention was drawn to some of the engravings and they were asked, "What are these things?" the old men, after a casual examination, said, "Oh, they're just marks on the wall," and walked away. Later, when the resemblance between some of the engravings and the tracks of kangaroos and emus and lizards and so on was pointed out, the natives were most surprised and searched enthusiastically for additional examples. But even though they agreed that the marks were not the result of a natural agency, they were definite that no Aboriginal had made them. No Aboriginal had made them. Nevertheless, they were just as ready as some of the white men to give meanings to the engravings. This ignorance of the rock engravings by the Aborigines was surprising, because as young men they must have hunted wallabies and other game through the rocks of Red Gorge. The following morning, two of the old men came to my camp to tell me that after discussing the engravings among themselves on the previous evening, they had agreed that the examples we had seen in the Red Gorge had been engraved by Iti, I-T-I, a mythical lizard man of creation times, who also made piles of small stones in the saddles of some of the low ranges. The Aboriginals of Central Australia, on the other hand, although aware of the existence of similar rock engravings in their country, stated that they had not been made by Aboriginal people, but by some mythical being who had lived during the early days of the world. This evidence from the living Aborigines suggests that the rock art engravings belonged to a people of a previous culture.
And this lost continent is allegedly in the Pacific. Now, other Indian texts also spoke of a lost continent in the Pacific, which apparently is different from Atlantis, a continent that was in the Atlantic Ocean. Back in the 1930s, a British-American colonel, he was actually British, his name was James Churchward, and later he lived in the United States. And he had worked as an army officer in India in the 1800s. About 1880 or so, he began traveling all over the world, especially in the Pacific. And he had been told by his teacher and shown ancient tablets, he claimed, in a temple in India, which, when translated, reportedly talked of this lost continent of the Pacific, which he called Mu. And I believe, there's been different names for this lost continent of the Pacific. Easter Islanders tend to call, they also have legends of a lost land. They call it Hiva. A French traveler in the mid-1800s, he called this lost land in the Pacific Rutas, which he claimed he also had been told by ancient Indian yogis and teachers there. Churchward chose the word Mu for this continent, and it's quite possible that that name comes from these ancient Chinese legends of the Emperor Mu and the goddess Siwang Mu, or Kuan Yin. And he then called Mu the motherland.
Well, here we are at Red Gorge, one of the more spectacular sites for rock carvings around Australia. Supposed Aboriginal carvings, and yet when Mumford talked to the Aboriginals in 1934, they said they had no knowledge of them and they were done long before they came. So it might not be accurate to actually say they're Aboriginal carvings. Now what we have behind us looks rather like the Egyptian Iophorus. It may be, it may not be. It even has what looks like a bit of a lizard carved through the middle of it. So God only knows what it actually is, but it looks astonishingly like it. With a lot of the stuff we're looking at, of course, we're looking for correlates with ancient languages or contact with ancient cultures and so on. Throughout the gorge here, we've found all sorts of extraordinary stuff. Most enigmatic are the owl men, goggled-eyed beings standing with their arms and legs out like this. Now, is that a record of something that went down a long, long time ago that whoever lived here was witness to and made some attempt to record it? What do you think about some of these carvings, John?
Well, the carvings here are pretty confusing because a lot of the images, you've got images of turtles, you've got images of things that are not indigenous to the region. The other thing that's kind of intriguing are the footprint images, because we've got images of footprints as small as only a few inches long, like a small child, maybe 6, 7 years old. Some of them have 6 toes and they're perfectly executed. And other images up the gorge have larger adult and bigger than adult human-sized footprints with 4 toes. So we're dealing with people that had 6 toes on their feet and other people that had 4 toes on their feet, which is pretty unusual considering we've got 5.
And this site's not quite so remarkable for clearly defined hieroglyphs. So over at Chambers Gorge we see very clear glyphic sort of writing style that can be associated with Hebrew, can be associated with Egyptian, Sumerian and so forth. Whereas here it's really just animals and tracks, and this would probably be one of the more enigmatic along with the goggled-eyed beings. With the Chambers site, what's curious about that is that very similar rock carvings are found at Mount Shasta in California, where the Modoc Indians lived, and they say, similar to the Aboriginals, that they were there long before they came and they didn't make them, and they were made by spirit beings. And we see the autograph of these spirit beings here also, the circle with the line through it, which is almost like the signature of the people that were here. There were so many strange and unusual carvings at Grid Point 44 that could well bear much more detailed study. The archaeologist from National Parks and Wildlife has carbon dated the oldest carvings at 40 to 60,000 years. That makes this ancient record at least 10 to 30,000 years older than the Cave of the Bulls in Altamira, Spain, which was previously thought of as the world's oldest rock art. In part 3, we look at Aboriginal prophecy relating to planetary changes as a result of damage to the grid, including cyclic changes that we're heir to. And we penetrate the mystery of how the grid works, the ancient harmonic science, the secret knowledge that Indigenous peoples have guarded for countless centuries.
There's people in the distant future looking at this tape going,
Yeah.
this is
Oh,
how
wow.
it started. Who are these people? Where do they come from? You know, they're ancient and they're justified and they'd love to roam the land.